There was a gentleman that I'd been praying for and kind of walking through stuff, and he comes to the church, and he travels a lot, so when he's in town, we have conversations. And there was a moment in his career just recently where he started experiencing some of the things that we've been praying for. There was some very real, tangible blessings that God was giving him and opportunities that God was giving him that I could see, because we'd been working together, that this is what we've prayed for. And I remember getting done with a Sunday service, and he was on the road and he was doing stuff, and I picked up the phone and I said, I want you to listen to me real quick. I said, this is a word not just from Jessie. This is a word that God spoke to my heart specifically for you. And he said, okay. He's like, ooh, boy. You know, he kind of had that pastoral like, ooh, is he about to say something, like call me out on something, or what's going on? But here was the word that God gave me specifically for him. I said, listen, there's a story in the Bible where there was 10 lepers that were sick. They had leprosy. And they called out to Jesus. And Jesus healed all 10 of them. They were all cleansed of their leprosy. I said, but one of them came back, praising God and giving thanks to God. And Jesus looked around. He said, were there not 10 of you that were healed and only one returned? And he said to the one that returned to give thanks, go and be made whole. You see, it was the gratitude that brought completion to the work that God started. And oftentimes what takes place is we start to experience the miracle, and then we let off the gas in our faith. But our prayers where we're asking have to become gratitude where we're praising if we want to see the completion of what God has started. And what I want to say to us tonight, in the same way that I said to him, is when God does something, if we don't process that with gratitude, we'll never experience the completion of that something. You see, leprosy was a disease that would leave scarring and marks that even people that would overcome it would always have the residual effect of it. And in that day and age, if somebody got it, they were isolated to the outside of town. Now, I don't know about you, but if somebody looked at me and went, ooh, get away, you got to go live over there. You can't be a part. It isn't just the disease at that point that messes with you. It's the insecurity. It's the doubt. It's the days that you lose because you've been in isolation and not being able to advance in your life. You see, the disease was one thing, but the impact that it had long term was another. And so when Jesus said, go and be made whole, yeah, he wasn't sick anymore, but now it's not just that he wasn't sick, now he's not impacted by what the sickness did. There's no more scarring, and there's no more emotional or mental that comes with being diagnosed with something so detrimental. And so there was a wholeness, there was a completion that came. And I've seen it myself where somebody comes into a service and God does a miracle, and then they leave and we don't see them for months. And then they come back with some of the same struggles they had when God did a great work in their life. They keep coming back when there's a problem, but they don't come back when there's praise. And so when it comes to the work of God, gratitude is a key component to who I believe God wants us to be. He wants us to be a grateful people. When he looked at this in Luke chapter 17, he said, you know, it's interesting because he didn't stop at first and go, thank you for coming and saying thank you. He looked around and said, weren't there 10 of you? I mean, in disappointment because only 1/10 of the people that God does a work in their life are willing to come back and be grateful. Isn't that crazy? 1 out of 10. And to which I say, God, let me be one. Let me live in the 10%. Let me live in that place. You know, we look at our society today, and then he tells the one, he says, arise and go and be made whole. There was a completion that God brought to the miracle. You see, when we talk about this idea of expressed gratitude, and I want to be clear on this, expressed gratitude. Everybody say expressed. Because unexpressed gratitude expresses ingratitude. You can feel grateful and not be grateful. So it's required that we express it, not just that we feel it. When I was a kid, my mom used to always challenge me, not just on my behaviors, but on my attitude. I remember, especially in my teenage years, I don't like your attitude. You're ungrateful. And as a teenager, here's how I would respond. I don't have an attitude. I am grateful. Right? But if you don't express it, it doesn't exist. Unexpressed gratitude expresses ingratitude. And so expressed gratitude is absolutely critical in our walk with God. In fact, expressed gratitude, what it does is it solidifies the work of God in our life. It solidifies the work of God in our life. Renew to me the joy of my salvation. God, I don't ever want to separate my heart of gratitude from the work that you've done in my life. Sometimes we get overwhelmed at our present problem because we forgot how good God was in our last problem. You see, there's a solidifying work that comes when we're truly grateful to God. In fact, on those days when you're not sure what to pray and you've just been praying in the Spirit and praying in the Spirit, the second thing I would tell you to do is just start giving thanks. Sometimes you don't have to ask for anything new. You just have to express thanks for what God has done. Because that's a solidifying of the work of God. The other thing that gratitude does is it encourages obedience to God. It encourages obedience to God. You know, here's what I found, is that people that are truly grateful are a lot more likely to share the good news that they have to share. People that are extremely grateful are more likely to share the gifts that they have to share. When we are extremely grateful, we're more likely to give of the treasure that God has given us. There's something about gratitude that opens my hands and opens my life to the obedience of God. I'm more likely to do what God has asked me to do if I'm grateful. Now, if I have a scarcity mindset, if I have a victim mindset, if I have a selfish mindset, if I'm like the prodigal son, hey, Dad, give me half of of my inheritance, but I want it now. If I have that mindset, I'm a lot less likely to share. I'm more likely to squander what God has given me. Now, on the other hand of that, we always talk about the prodigal son, but what about the prodigal brother who couldn't come out and celebrate the fact that his brother had come home? Because I deserve more. God, Dad, you've never given me a sheep to slaughter. Yeah, I didn't ask for the inheritance. I've just been here working. Woe is me, I deserve more. But can I tell you, when somebody's grateful, you're more likely to walk in obedience because your life and your hands are open to God. So gratitude encourages obedience to God. And what gratitude does is it conditions our heart. But I would say that a lack of expressing gratitude also conditions our heart. But there's a conditioning of our heart that happens when we express gratitude. And gratitude calibrates our thinking. You can go and just research for yourself the health benefits and the psychological benefits of just being thankful. I think, you know, in a world where we are overwhelmed with anxiety and depression and all of those things, can I tell you one of the quickest ways to start combating that in your life is to start expressing your gratitude and your thanks. Can I tell you, your life, you may be in a really hard time. I'm not dismissing that. But if you want to shed light to the darkness, start giving thanks when it's dark. It calibrates your thinking. And then gratitude, when you express it, it strengthens your relationships. When you express gratitude, it strengthens your relationships. Can I tell you that even sometimes in marriage, the only time something of passion is communicated is out of anger. But when you want intimacy, you want closeness, when you want there to be good things flourishing and happening in a relationship, just be thankful. And it's not just enough to feel it, you have to express it. I mean, people that remember, a long time ago, I used to be the marriage pastor, and it was amazing to me that if you would get couples sitting in front of each other and say, I want you to look at them in the eye, and I want you to tell them something you're grateful for. It's like, they just freeze. Why? Because you're breaking down an intimacy barrier when you start doing that. But if you just do it, and you continue to do it, and you're always doing it, then it just becomes the nature of who you are. It strengthens the relationship. It strengthens that relationship, but it's true for all relationships. Learn to get good at saying thanks and giving thanks. You see, the problem, at least that I've learned, and there's been several of these things like this. I think there's a few things like this. But being ungrateful is very difficult to see in the mirror. Because I think the majority of us, myself included, if you were to go, you're ungrateful, we would be offended. We'd be like, I'm not ungrateful. Tell me I'm ungrateful. I know what I'm grateful for. I'm very thankful for where I am. You know, I mean, it's almost offensive, right? I mean, to say that, you're just, Pastor Fred, you're not grateful. I mean, it's like, who are you? You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't get to tell me I'm ungrateful. You don't know how I feel. And so it's one of those things that is difficult to see in the mirror. So it really requires an evaluation. It requires that we ask God, search my heart, God. Look at the inside of me. How good am I at truly expressing gratitude? How am I doing when it comes to giving you praise and giving you thanks? You see, what ungratefulness will expose itself in major areas of our life. The problem with the lack of gratitude is it shows up in big areas, not just small areas. So it's not just like, I didn't sleep so well last night because I was thinking about, my problems at work all night. That can be a problem because it's a long night when you're up all night. But see, eventually what happens with being ungrateful is it shows up in our financial discontentment. I'm uncontent with what I have and where I am. And that causes you to hold on to it. I gotta keep it. I gotta get mine. I gotta keep mine. I don't have enough. I gotta get more. I gotta have enough. I gotta get more. And eventually someday when I have more, then I'll start giving to God. Then I'll give it back to God. But the problem is that if you can't give off 10 cents, you won't give off $1. And if you can't give off $1, you won't give off $10. If you can't give off $10, you won't give off 100. It doesn't automatically start when you get so far. No. Obedience begins now. It always begins now. And then it shows up in relational discontentment. Our relationships get hard. They get challenging. And it starts to fracture relationships. There starts to be a tension there because we focus on the problems. Let's just, by a show of hands, how many of you can agree that there is part of you that is hard to get along with? We all agree with that? We get out of the way? Now, how many of you would just agree that there's a part of you that's actually pretty good too? Listen, can I tell you, there is always a way for us to be grateful for the people that God places in our life. There's always a way. We don't have a lot of time, or I'd spend a lot of time talking about that, but learning how to thank God for the relationships and the people that He has put around you is absolutely critical to the strength of the relationship. And then we deal with circumstantial discontentment, right? It's like, oh man, I see people that I just need to move. I just need to get out of here. You know what? Sometimes you just need to water your grass. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes you just need to be grateful for where you are. Because the grass is green where you water it. Like the neighbor's yard looks real good because they spent some time watering their yard. Look, sometimes we get restless and it's really not the circumstances around us. It's the conditions that are in us that are causing us to be restless. And I'm not saying that God will never move you. But what I am saying is that sometimes we feel the need to move off of where we are, not because there's a problem with where we are, because there's a problem with who we are. But we'll talk about that another day. I'm sorry. That's a lot after Easter. We've been having y'all pray. We've been having y'all show up. That's a lot. And then spiritual discontentment. Spiritual discontentment. Can I just tell you, you could go look no further than the Israelites. God provided for them in the desert. He always made sure they had something to eat. Look, there was water coming from rocks. You saw the miracle of God, and what did they do? They complained and they complained and they complained and they complained. Spiritual discontentment comes when we lack gratitude. Just being thankful. Can I tell you, I think it's important that you get your heart to a place where you understand if Jesus only went to the cross and rose from the dead for you, that was enough. Because it might be uncomfortable down here for a few years, but eternity is a long time to be uncomfortable. So it's important that we learn how to choose our attitude when it comes to being grateful. Choose our attitude. Paul said this in Philippians chapter 4, verse 11 through 13. I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. Does that bother anybody else but me? Here's why it bothers me, because Paul made this statement. He said, I've learned to be content. Content is not something that happens to me. Content is something I learn how to be. It requires that I grow, not that my circumstances, my relationships, or anything else changes. My contentment is up to me to grow. And then he said this in verse 13, right after that, he says, I can do everything through him who gives me strength. He said, I've learned to be content, and I've learned the secret of being content in every situation is learning that I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. You see, when we talk about this idea of contentment, Ecclesiastes 6:9, it says, better what the eye see than the roving of the appetite. He's saying it is better to focus on what you have and not focus on what you don't have. It's better to focus on the good of the moment and not about what you wish you had. It doesn't mean that you kill your drive to want to move forward. It just means that you learn how to be grateful and content with where you currently are today. Amen. See, being grateful helps you focus more on the positive and also keeps you focused on what's most important in life. So you've got to choose to be content. And then you choose gratitude. Choose gratitude. There's something that happens in faith. So when I first got saved, and I don't know how this is for you, I remember when I first got saved, I was on fire. That's what we called it, right? In the church circles, I was on fire for Jesus. I was feeling it. Even when worship was bad, I was feeling the presence of God. But can I just tell you, there's some days when I show up to church, when worship is good, and I have to now praise myself into feeling. I don't feel myself into praising. It's got nothing to do with the quality of what's happening on the stage. It's just my faith has matured to the point where I don't need feelings for me to give God praise. And so when it comes to this thing, when you start in faith, you might feel your way into God. But when you mature in faith, you learn how to discipline yourself and you begin to act and then you begin to feel. You say, I don't need goosebumps for me to stop and say, God, you're so good. That's right. God, you're so faithful. God, you're worthy. You receive the glory. Can I tell you, I've been mad and walked into this very sanctuary when nobody else was here and just stood right here and said, God, you're worthy. God, you're worthy. And I'm saying it like in a mad voice because I'm ticked off about something. And next thing you know, when I leave here and I'm no longer mad. I didn't come in here because everything was going well. I came in here because things weren't going well, and I needed to fix my thinking. I needed to fix my heart. I needed to fix my feelings. I needed to fix it. So I did it and so you act your way into the feeling. You say, I don't feel grateful. That doesn't matter. Are you grateful? Then if you are, you learn how to express that. So you choose gratitude. And here's what I've learned about gratitude, and we'll stop here tonight and we'll pick it up another time. But here's what I've learned about gratitude. You know, there's a song, and I don't know the name of the song. I just remember hearing it on the radio. And the guy's singing, and he said, I wished we had known those were the good old days while they were still the good old days. You know, you look back, and I think a lot of people do this. The longer you go in life, you look back, you go, I remember those times. Those were the best of times. And we look through our photos, and we're going back, and Facebook brings up a memory that happened years ago, and you go, that was incredible. But I mean, if we're being honest, yeah, that was incredible, but we were kind of grumpy in the middle of that picture. You know, I mean, yeah, it was a good time looking back on it, but in the middle of it, all we were consumed was the stress of it. You know, I can tell you that as a dad, I've had incredible mentors in my life as a father. And everybody will tell you, Jessie, it goes by quick. Make sure you enjoy it. It goes by faster than you realize. Those times when you're frustrated because you're driving them to practice and you got a million things to do, there's going to be a day when you're sitting on your couch wishing you got to go to one more practice. Jessie, be careful. It goes by quick. You're going to be annoyed because that little boy of yours is going to come into your room in the middle of the night, and you're going to be going, I got a lot to do tomorrow. You can't quit waking me up. But there's going to be a day where you're going to wake up in the middle of the night wishing those little feet will come patter into your room and wake you up one more time and lay in your bed. You know, can I tell you what gratitude does? Is it brings joy into the present. And I never want to get caught in living off of only the joy of the memory. I want to live in the joy of the moment. And what gratitude does, learning to be grateful even when it's not perfect. Will I be tired? You bet I will. Will there be days when it ain't so good? Yeah, there probably going to be some days when it ain't so good. But joy comes in the morning. We're going to find it again tomorrow. I don't want to just one day look through my photos and go, oh, that was a good moment. I want to remember feeling the joy of that moment. In the same way that I want to have joy in this moment. And what gratitude does is it invites joy. Proverbs 15 and 16, it says, the cheerful heart has a continual feast. I love that. The cheerful heart has a continual feast. And for somebody that likes to eat, I connect with that verse. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, let's eat good. If nothing else goes good, let's eat good. It says, better a little with the fear of the Lord than great wealth with turmoil. You know what he's saying? He's saying, look, you might have all that you ask for, but if it's all with turmoil, it doesn't matter. It's better to have a little where you're grateful to God than to have a lot where you're just overwhelmed. The cheerful heart has a continual feast. When we choose gratitude, it invites joy. There's a completion to the work of God that comes when we choose to be grateful. But can I tell you, the best of God is experienced when we learn how to be grateful. When we learn how to be grateful, joy is at our fingertips. The next time that something happens that's inconvenient, remember that it's probably somewhere before. It was probably something you prayed for. It was probably something you desired. It's probably something that you wanted. And it may not be packaged exactly like you thought it was going to be packaged. But stop in the moment, take a breath, and give thanks. before you allow the stress of the moment to rob you of the joy of the moment.